Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight we are on episode 271, and we are going to talk a little bit about safety nets. And Ben, this is your topic, your suggestion, so I'm going to get you to lead us in. And you already kind of told me what you're thinking there, but why don't you line everybody else up for where our
Yeah,
topic's going tonight?
yeah. So this came a bit from stuff that I've done and in stuff I've seen posted recently, and I love to search the forums and see what people are doing, and how do people deal with different situations and all that. And one of the common ones is people say, "Oh, I really want to do it, but I have no one to go with." And we've talked about this here before. You can post on forums and find like-minded people, and like any other event, like sport, you can find people, but there's something about going in the woods with just one other person that might not be it might feel a little, it's not like getting joining a rec hockey team, or even finding someone to play volleyball or tennis or golf, where you're usually surrounded by a whole bunch of other people. It's a pretty open and public thing. This is a spot where you're a little less open and public, and if your partner turns out to be not as skilled or as knowledgeable or as prepared, the consequences could be quite bad. So there's a lot to consider when you're going in the woods with people, and we've talked about situations in the past where we've gone with people who weren't fully prepared and ready and capable, and how we had to deal with that. So I wanted to talk about this. What is our safety nets? How do we protect ourselves, and how do we make sure that what we're doing is smart and good? So, like I said, the first thing is, you're in a situation where you would really like to go camping, say, at a relatively hard to get place, and your significant others, your best friends, they're just not into this stuff. This is not something that they want to do, but it's something you really want to do. So what if we said, post, right? So you can post online, you can post on Facebook, different forums and stuff around. It depends on what you're into, but there's plenty of options, and you have to be somewhat sensible about where you're posting. Post on ones that are relevant to what you want to do.
And that's key there, is keep it as specific as you can starting off. Which is very opposite to what we normally say. Usually we say be very general and, focus in later. This is definitely one of those things where you kind of want to be a little bit more specific starting off, especially where you're posting, like you said. Don't just post in a Canada-wide forum if you're looking for somebody to go to Nova Scotia, for instance. So try and keep it local, and try and keep it to the group of people you're looking for, if that kind of makes sense. So bushcrafting forums and stuff like that's a great place to start. Hopefully the people that are working around these places have a little bit of knowledge on the subject, bare minimum.
And make sure that it's be fairly specific, and set clear boundaries when you're posting. I've seen a really good one recently, where the person indicated the type of people they wanted to go with, the age range, the skill type. They did detail it down a lot, and you may get some slack. Some people might go, "I don't think that's fair. I'm only 2 years out of your range," or "I'm a guy but I'm harmless," or "I'm a girl but I'm not interested." Well, if somebody's not comfortable camping with someone of the opposite sex, or somebody wants people closer to their age so there's more to relate to, that's perfectly acceptable, and not that much different than dating in a lot of ways. Like, finding that right partner to do these kind of trips with is a very individual choice.
And that's the thing. People may say, "Oh, hey, that's not fair," but at the end of the day, you are planning something that you are doing personally for enjoyment. You do have the ability to narrow that down and do what you want. You have the right to be happy while you're out there. Don't go out there just for the sake of going out there, though. I'm going to admit, I'm sure you and I have both been guilty of just going out there for the sake of going out there. But you don't need to, is the thing. You can have the luxury to request and find and explore anyone or anything that you want to go out there with you. Once again, this is your choice, your time, your fun, your enjoyment. Try and make it as much as such. or sorry, try to make it as such. You know what I mean? Like, get the people you want, just like Ben said here. Get the age group that you want, the gender you want, maybe like-minded people. Like, maybe you want people that follow your spiritual belief. Maybe you want people that follow no spiritual belief. Like, you can get as specific as you want or non-specific as you want. But starting off, I would definitely go specific, especially if you're fairly new to bushcrafting yourself or camping or whatever, because it's going to give a lot of common ground. Now, later on, absolutely, it's fun to dabble in differences, but you still have to have some commonality. You know what I mean? At that point, hopefully you understand the skill level of the people you're going with, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this here in a few minutes, but if you don't know the person and they haven't been recommended to you or you haven't seen them working around a form or something like that, then try and keep it specific, you know?
Yeah, and I think once you get responses, and I highly suspect that if you post on these forums and you've posted well and you've been clear, that there's probably very many like-minded people that are going to respond, and not all of them are perfect. Don't get me wrong. And I'm going to tell you from my experience, about 50% or more will flake on you long before the trip happens.
Oh, absolutely. That's the
Right?
thing. It's hard to get people to come out and do something. Lots of people will say it, and lots of people have good intentions. I'm not saying these people out there maliciously doing this. It's just not even bushcrafting, anything. Make any plans. Like Ben said, 50% or more of the people that are supposed to be involved in those plans, they're not going to show up. Something's going to happen.
They can't get the time off. Don't have the right equipment. They're not feeling well. There's other family commitments or other things have come up. It's just it does seem that even like I said, long before, and as you approach the date, even more of those will fall off. And I had one trip planned. I think there was about 10 of us. We were going to go to the Toby Attic, and if Chris Morsley, if Rather Be Outside is on here, he was part of that original group, and I could see right in the beginning that this was a failure trip. Long before it never did happen. None of them ever showed up to do it, and I ended up coming up with an alternate plan for that particular weekend. And I don't even think that me and Chris met that trip, but it was another trip that we were both trying to get in on that we ended up doing a trip together. And that kind of shows that even if it doesn't work the first time you try to do it, it might happen. But it's really important to also, once you've identified people you're interested in camping with or experiencing these types of trips, ask questions. And I know this sounds an awful lot of it like dating, but it kind of is. You're getting a type of partner in for a trip, and hopefully if it works out well, this is a close friend that'll be with you for a while.
And that's the thing.
No,
You are developing a relationship with this person. It perhaps may not be a romantic relationship, but it is a relationship. There has to be some sort of compatibility, some sort of chemistry.
Yeah. So ask the questions. You know, what kind of food do you plan on eating? How much food? Do you expect us to share food? Are you drinking? Are you not drinking? Do you have fears? Is there things we need to deal with? Like some people might want to go, but they're afraid to be in the dark, or maybe they're afraid to be far from the person they're with. They don't want to be really alone in the woods, or maybe they snore and want to make sure they're not disturbing you, so they're going to set up far away. And if you understand these things, you maybe won't get offended when they make decisions or do things for these particular type of things. So ask the questions. And one thing I'm going to say is, depending on the questions, it's okay to eliminate someone. And it's also, if you feel like they're being dishonest, or if the things don't seem to be right, because there's a lot of trolls out there, cut them off. Like, don't, call them on it if you want, but in the end, back out. If they can't be honest with you early on in that relationship, don't go in the woods alone with them, because they might say, "Oh, I'm really experienced. I know how to paddle a canoe. I can do this. I can do that." And you get out there, and they have no idea. And now you're half a day, a full day into the woods with somebody who's a complete liability to you. So,
and that does happen a lot. Most people, and I do say this generically, but it is pretty common. A lot of people are going to overinflate their skill set. You know what I mean? Because they might have tried something once and were successful at it at home in a controlled environment. And all of a sudden, oh yeah, I can do that. Okay, you can do that, but can you do that in the woods with limited resources? You know what I mean? There's a difference between able to do something in your backyard and actually do something in the woods. And this is something that I learned, and I'm going to straight up admit it as I was doing bushcraft or learning bushcraft, developing my skills and stuff, specifically like bow drill, things like that. Out here in my pergola, it's super simple when I have everything there. It's a nice flat surface. I got a pad for my knee. There's no moisture around. There's no pressure on. Get an ember every single time. But Ben, you and I have gone into the woods, and I even told you this. Like, in the woods, you are lucky to get an ember going with a bow drill. And you and I tried it for quite some time on one of our camping trips, and we had smoke. We even almost had an ember once, but between the two of us, we were just exhausted and never did get an ember. And that's the thing. There's a lot of times when if this person's saying, oh yeah, you don't have to worry about fire, I can do a bow drill and it's going to be 100% successful, BS. I call BS right out of the gate. Bring a different fire starter. And we've said this in the past before, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. But same kind of deal. Don't trust the skill set unless you have a little experience with this person in a woods environment. And that brings me to my next point, which would be don't necessarily go deep woods camping with somebody that you've just met.
This is a rule we've both broken.
Yes. Yes, we have. But, I mean, generally, if it's somebody you just met and you have no experience with them, you're not going to do that. Now, when we went, we both knew each other from the Nova Scotia Bushcraft gathering, at least in passing and name. We'd seen each other on the Nova Scotia Bushcraft forum. We had kind of half stalked each other Facebook wise, or at least I'm going to say I stalked you a little bit and seen that you had been out camping. I seen that, you actually do go out to the woods. It's not a camping park. You know what I mean? Because that's the other thing. Some people be like, oh yeah, I'm an outdoorsy person. And all they've ever done is camping parks, which is absolutely fine. Don't mistake, I'm not digging on camping parks. But if you're expecting to go deep woods camping, it's two different camp styles.
We are not the same as car campers. We do car camp, but what our other things are, it's not the same. It's not, they're two different things, and that's fine. One of the things is get a references. It seems a bit odd, but find some other people that know them, or ask them if you can talk to other people that they've gone to, and see if you can get the odd reference. Some of the people I've gone with, I've chatted with online, and I've kind of seen, like you said, you can check what they're doing, and you can see if they've posted similar stuff, and you can kind of get those things. It's not quite like asking for a job reference, but just like, do you have other camping buddies you've gone into past with, or and at least they can give you something. You may not reach out to them, but let's just see if they would give you some references or photos. Share field trips and see. If you can share a few photos of stuff you're doing, like if they have photos of them in a canoe and them in a kayak and them with a tent and them setting things up, and you're like, oh, they've probably been out there. Now, could they have stealed these off the internet? Absolutely. And I'm going to give away a secret I have. And Google has an image search, and if you're talking to somebody online and they start providing you with photos and you think that they're a little shady, do an image search on their photo, and if it shows up all across the internet, like in multiple sites, chances are they stole that picture.
Yeah, and that does happen a lot. Once again, people are out there. It's sad to say that they're showboaters, you know what I mean? They want to overinflate themselves, make themselves seem better than what they are. I don't quite understand the purpose, but it happens on a regular basis.
Well, I have... You probably understand this about me. I will troll a troll. If somebody's trying to scam me, I will waste their time, and I will play with them for hours on end, because honestly, it's funny as hell to me. But I will find out if you're a troll pretty quickly. And if I truly think you're a troll, I will eventually cut you off. But I will play with you, and I will call you on it.
And I mean, that's part of the game too. You know what I mean? I'm quite the same. I generally, if I think somebody's blowing smoke, I'll test the waters. You know what I mean? What do we have from the comment here? So, Steve, the Drifting Spore. Um, I'm always learning. My experience is limited, but I don't let that. And I hate the comments thing here. There we go. I don't let that stop me. I'm always upfront about that, though. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
Don't ever feel like you have to impress someone. Just be honest. There's tons of people out there that's going to fit into your skill set, and there's tons of people out there that'll fit into your skill set. You don't need to inflate this stuff. There's no reason behind it. We don't have to go out there. We have nothing to prove. We're going out to have fun and enjoy it.
And I think what you just said there is the important thing. I don't mind if you come to me and say, listen, Ben, I'm not a good canoeer. I'm not a good kayaker. Or I've not done a 20-kilometer hike. But if I know that, I'm going to take that into account. So if we're planning a canoe trip, I'm not doing 30 kilometers in the first day. Not with a beginner. We're doing like a half-day trip. And if we barely make it, great. I don't care. But we'll make it. Like, I know a one-day trip, even with an anchor, and by anchor I mean somebody who's useless as a paddler, I'm still going to make it there in a day. But hopefully, within a day or two, he or she will improve to the point where the next day is much easier. And then probably the next trip, we can look at a more challenging trip. That's fine, you know. It's fine to learn and grow. But I've been on trips and where we went with somebody that felt very confident that they could make it, they could do it, and I think we damn near killed them. You know?
No, I know exactly what you mean.
Right? So they thought they had the skill and the stamina and the ability, and they didn't. That's fine. We had enough people who did, and we did fine. But you have to be willing to make that call too. If you get so far in and you realize that somebody can't pull their weight and that it's putting everything else in danger, you need a backup plan. Right?
No,
You
100%.
need to know when do I call it and say no, we're turning around, we're not making it to the end today, and it should be before the halfway point, right? Because then you're like, well, I might as well finish today.
So,
aware of that.
while we're on that topic, let's talk about contingency plans because that's kind of what we're talking about here tonight. And that's a long way around, but yeah, let's talk about our safety nets. So what happens when you do get in the woods and it all kind of goes south? When do you check out? When do you trust your gut and saying, something's just not right here?
Yeah. I mean, it's situational, so it's not like I can give, in my opinion, this is the dead thing. But if at one point you lose trust in the other person, call it. If you no longer trust that you can trust this person to A, take care of themselves, and B, take care of you should the need come around, if they make you feel uncomfortable or nervous, call it then. The second you feel that it's just, you're no longer comfortable with this situation, don't grin and bear it and say, I'll make it through the trip. No, call it. Tell them, I'm not comfortable, this is a good idea, I think we're going to call it. And it sucks. It really does. Because you had a trip plan and they had a trip plan and now you're killing it. But honestly, it's not worth yours or theirs life or some kind of trauma that you're not willing to put up with. So if at some point you're going in and you're thinking, this isn't working out for me, I'm not comfortable, this seems a bit odd, you know, call it. Just say, listen, I'm not comfortable right now, I'm going back. And I'm a big proponent now, more so than I used to be, of always having a means of communication.
Nope, I agree. And the good thing is nowadays that most cell phones are going to work in most places. There are some places where they're not going to, and you have a device that actually will be satellite connection. That is the Garmin InReach. InReach 2.
InReach Mini 2 is the one I have, but yeah, any of those there's a bunch of really good ones out there, and I highly recommend that somebody have one of those. And the second you feel uncomfortable, send a message stating that. Say, listen, this is where I'm to. I've decided to head back. I am uncomfortable with my situation, whatever. And then somebody knows what's going on and that you're coming back. So if you don't show up on time, they might send someone to help you or make sure you get out fine. Um, and I don't mean this to be scary, but not everyone has good intentions, and sometimes it's not even to do with that, but it's just you're worried for the other person that they're pushing themselves to a limit that they can't handle. Whatever the reason of your uncomfortness, trust your gut instinct at this point, and if it's meant to be, you'll have another chance with that individual to do a trip, and maybe it's just not. It just wasn't the time for that trip, and so you can make those decisions. Um, what else?
Um,
Anytime.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, because I think your thought might be more in line. I was going to move to the next topic.
No, I was going to say, for me, when you're out there and if you're with somebody else and red flags start coming up, I do a gut check. And I mean,
Yeah.
that's the best thing I can tell you is trust the gut. In all honesty, if something feels off or you just don't feel right or you get that, this is going to be a terrible situation, start weighing that with, is it going to be a terrible situation that you can get through and still have some enjoyment? Or is it just going to be a bad situation all the way through? If you get to that, this is just going to be a nightmare, I just want to go home state, just go home. In all
Yeah.
honesty, just go home. And there's something to be said about that. Like, I'm a guy that exclusively trusts my gut. A lot of my jobs in the past have all been on, gut instinct and stuff like that to some degree. So that in itself is a skill you can develop. And honestly, more often than not, if your gut tells you you shouldn't be there, you shouldn't be there. And there could be a variety of reasons that tell you why not to be there. The weather's getting bad. The person you're with is, they completely blew themselves out of proportion. Maybe the area is just not what you thought it was when you set out to go there. If you were, if you just pulled something off Google Maps and you got there and it's changed, there's a lot of reasons that you may need to turn around. It's not just going to be something simple like, oh, this guy sucks, or this girl sucks, or this group sucks. That could be a reason, but there could be 100 other reasons in there too. If something is telling you you shouldn't be there, you probably shouldn't.
Yeah. You show up, and the trail is way rougher and muddier and not safe. Or, I mean, I've gone places where it was icy. It was just not. It didn't feel safe to walk it. So we didn't. I've also tried to take my vehicle down roads, and I'm like, oh, it ain't going. And so rather than push it and actually damage the vehicle and not make it out, in those cases, I usually pull aside and walk it a bit. And if it ain't getting better in the next couple hundred feet, then I'm turning around and calling it at that point. If you can look at the weather and it's obviously going poorly, and you just don't feel that that's going to make the good trip, because sometimes poor weather is a great trip. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes you get in there, you set it up, the rain comes for a few minutes, but I mean, I've often gone and the rain only lasts 10, 15 minutes, and I'm like, man, I could have canceled this trip, but I suffered through 10 minutes of rain, and it's been awesome. So,
Or the flip side of that is it could be it wasn't supposed to rain and it hasn't stopped raining, which is kind of what we ran into when we went to Cliff's Landing, if I'm not mistaken. It was supposed to sprinkle, but it ended up
yeah,
just storming all night. But we had fun with that.
we had fun. Yeah. So these are things to keep in mind. So I just want to recap a little bit. Vet your people before you go. Take your time to do that. Really trust your instincts. Have a communication methods in case something does go wrong that you can get out, especially for first time trips that you don't know your skill levels and stuff. Our first trip and our next trip would be totally different trips. We were really still, as much as we knew about each other, because our first trip we did, we had been doing a podcast for months. We had met a couple of times. We'd been in a bushcraft situation before, but we were still feeling each other out to see, does this guy know what he's talking about? Is he comfortable? Are they a know-it-all that's just not going to listen to anything I have to say? And in the end, we realized that we had good mutual respect and we treated each other well, and we felt comfortable that we would do well. I think. I mean, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here.
No, I think you're right. No.
But yeah, so that's some of those things. So that safety net to get out. The other thing is oftentimes, even with I have you make a trip, you generally have waypoints.
Yeah.
places you're planning on going to, stopping, maybe camping, identify any places that you could bug out of. So oftentimes, say you're doing a river trip, there are oftentimes spots that are good that you could stop, pull out of the river, and get to a road reasonably well, and say, this trip, I can stop here, rather than finish the trip. And you may have to call an Uber or call a buddy to come get you or something. It may be a hassle, but at least it's an option. It's a way out where, say you're going down the river and it's getting rougher than you expect, and you're just like, oh, I don't think I can handle it. Or maybe you do some minor damage to your canoe or your equipment and say, I don't think this trip it can be continued. Make sure that you know where those potential escape routes are.
And you know what? That is a big one that raises red flags that a lot of people will avoid, is damaged equipment. A lot of people say, oh, we can just make do. Oh, we can just make do. Make sure that you can actually make do and that you're not putting yourself into a dangerous situation at a pride. Does that make sense? If you're sleeping arrangements, the one that's coming to mind for me is wet sleeping bags. There's been a couple of times when I've been out with people and their sleeping bags gotten wet and they're like, oh, don't worry about it, we'll make do. And I knew it was going to be a cooler, damper night, and I'm like, well, I don't know if that sleeping bag's going to get dry. That's one of those things where your gut's kicking in and telling you something's not right. Is there a contingency for that? Do you have extra gear? What happens if this person's sleeping bag does not get dried? I mean, there's a real situation where if that sleeping bag doesn't get dry, that individual may not sleep that night. Or because they can't get in a wet sleeping bag, you know what I mean? And I can tell you right now, sure as hell, they're not climbing in with me. My sleeping bag is tight enough as it is.
So, I mean, that's a really good one. And the story, I went with two people I'd never met before. We went to a lake. We all decided we were going to take kayaks, and we went in. And that's exactly what happened. One of the kayaks sank. All their gear got wet. We pulled off on a spot that wasn't the intended camping spot for the night. And we lit a fire, and we managed to dry the individual's gear that got wet. And we had a good night. We had a good trip. And I learned a lot from both of those individuals that night. And I've done multiple trips with each of those people since then. And it's being good, but it took those kind of instances and the willingness to change our plans to make sure that everyone was safe and able to, have a good night's sleep. Because that could have went really bad really quick.
Oh, that's what I mean. Having no sleeping bag is a serious thing depending on how cool it is out. And it doesn't have to be that cold for it to be a bad situation. Like 15 degrees without a blanket sounds plenty warm. You're going to get cold in the middle of the night.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, the other thing is safety nets that I wanted to go back to.
Sure.
I think that, the ability to make the call, so like your in-reach device or your spot or your what's the new one, Defy? There's a bunch of these out there now. The new iPhones, I think, have one built in. Motorola has ones that have built-in satellite texting capabilities. But having somebody you can call once you get in there.
Yeah, 100%. And we've said that before, just as a safety precaution, even if it's by yourself. Always make sure somebody knows where you're at.
Yeah. But, and it doesn't work for me and you as well as it used to. But oftentimes you would make a trip or I would make a trip. We knew where each other were going to go. And even if we couldn't do the trip together, if one of us had called the other and said, listen, buddy, I'm really sorry to do this for you, but I can't get out. I need help. We would have probably come and got each other or made arrangements with people we know. It's good to have that kind of backup up. So if in these forums, if you can make other friends, people with similar equipment and skills, then maybe you can have somebody say, listen, if anything ever goes wrong, emergency, would you help me out? With my inReach, I try to identify people that I think could help me and talk to them about it, and I'll add them to my notifications in case I need help.
Right. And Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? What do you mean you make contact with them? Is there something in the inReach that you can actually reach out to people? Or do you mean you
Oh
just
yeah.
have your contacts
No.
linked into that?
So you have to build your contacts into my inReach. But
Okay.
once they're built in, I can send a message to anyone in the world.
So you can put, how many contacts can you have on that? I'm slightly going off topic here, but somebody may be interested in this.
I don't think there's a limit.
Oh, that's kind of neat.
You just go on the website, and like when I send a message, like my check-ins, I can send it to all kinds of people. I can even send it. I used to be able to send it to Facebook, and I think recently they've taken that off. I used to be able to send to Facebook and Twitter or X, but I think they've as of this month that function's going away. But I can send it to an email chain. I can send it to a whole bunch of options. There are options of who I can send it to. Phone numbers. There's a bunch of ways I can notify you. So the way that works is I send a simple message probably to the satellite, and it goes down to the app, and then the app distributes it out. So it's not like it's sending them all from the spot. It sends it to the cloud, and then the cloud makes that decision.
Hmm.
But yeah, I can choose individual contacts, or I can send it to a whole group. So yeah, I can. And if they have the same device, you can even link the devices in a way so you can communicate between them. Still cost you something. I mean, there's a cost per message. But if you're broke down and you're looking at like a long walk or a very uncomfortable trip out, $1 or something per text seems awfully cheap.
You're right. That gets real cheap real fast. And I mean, we've had somebody on the podcast before that actually had to use one of those things and get somebody to come in and get them. And I mean,
Yeah.
unfortunately, his story was a little, it had its ups and downs. I'll leave it with that. But at the end of the day, it worked. You know what I mean? He hit the button, help did get into him. Like I said, I wish the story had went a little better for him, but the help was there.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah, so just to kind of recap, vet people, have a backup plan, know where you're going to, have a backup plan also for yourself and if equipment goes down. Let's see, Red Bear Tactical. I've packed tire chains in the winter. Those will get you out of a bind if used properly. And that's the kind of thing. Like, prepare for where you're going. Don't go in all willy-nilly. I take a VHF radio with resource road channels on it in a pinch. It could maybe make contact with someone in an emergency. And here's the thing. Something that I've looked at. Go ahead, Ben, and
Oh, no. I'm just going to say, a lot of these little radios, even the short-range personal use ones, I mean, obviously the more commercial ones are a little bit better and can go through repeaters and stuff. But they have a pretty impressive range. Some of them, like, in line of sight, they're almost all line of sight, but some of them can go 20, 30 kilometers. Not too bad. And oftentimes there's other people out there, so they could relay the message or they could come help you. So if you have anything that can reach out, it's better than nothing by far. And these things don't weigh a ton. We have them at a campground. We use a whole bunch of these. I think they're FSRs.
I was going to say, I got Cobras sitting right up there, but I mean,
Yeah.
there's all kinds of options.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And honestly, just a good GPS and compass. And I know we've harked on this a lot, but don't go into the woods without your basic safety gear. Those are your lifelines. Those are kind of your backup plans. If things go awry and you have a good map and compass, you can usually walk yourself out of a situation. Or a GPS, same kind of deal. Just keep in mind it relies on batteries. So just either ensure you get the batteries for the trip you're going to take. And I mean, some of them are really good on batteries. My GPS over there, I think I change the battery like every 2 years in it. It's super good on batteries. But it still works on batteries. So anything that works on batteries, there's the potential of it breaking down. Something could fail on that GPS. So I'm still a big advocate of always carrying a compass backup, even when you have a GPS.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Or if nothing else, have a couple of GPS options. I mean, if you think about right now, if I go in the woods, I mean, and there are various degrees of good. I don't own a standalone GPS anymore. Well, I do, but it doesn't work well. So I mean, the one I have that still functions is very old, and I'm not happy with it anymore. I'd like to get a new one. Uh, but I bought into this Garmin InReach series, so I like that. So I have the InReach, which has a GPS function in itself. I have my phone, which has a GPS, and the apps that will allow me to communicate to those devices. And my watch has a GPS built into it. So those are three GPS items that I can reference. So when I'm driving my motorcycle through the woods, I have one of the map programs up, and it's on my dash. That is my GPS, and it's charging all the time. But it could break. It could not work. At least my phone or my watch and my InReach device can still give me coordinates and information that's useful.
No, 100%. And that's the thing. Even with your phone, if you're in an area that does not have data, if you do a little preemptive planning, you can generally download the offline maps and it's still going to function perfectly fine for you in those areas. Much like Cliff's Landing, where we went camping that time we've mentioned, there's an area that I go camping prior to that. Complete cell dead zone. You have to download the offline maps, but they still work just as fine. And the thing that I like is a lot of the Android devices, in my instance, it hooks to my Ford Ranger. So I can plug it in, I can have it up on the dash, I can drive to where I want to be, it's going to communicate with my phone. So if I download the offline maps, I now have that navigation directly on my vehicle, and I can cover a lot more ground and have a lot more security while I'm doing it. Now, I know a lot of vehicles now still have navigation built in, but that's still reliant on, in a lot of cases, a subscription service. Have you seen this thing now? The paywalls behind navigation on vehicles?
Mm.
That's a whole other conversation. But
Well, and honestly, I have so many on my phone right now, and I just use that. I don't want to worry about that. Um, and even my vehicle, I have an Android radio head on it, and I put all the same apps on it. So my SUV has backroad maps, it has Gaia, it has all these other ones, and I can do the same thing. And it's really important, and you really hit on that. Download your maps before you go offline, because if you don't, it might even work till you turn it off. When you turn it back on, you may not have the roads or anything anymore. It'll probably give you your coordinates and all that, but you're going to lose all these back roads and stuff. So I've done 2 or 3 trips in the last couple of months, and that has been a very important thing where I've done, because you get back there and like I do back roads trips. Some of those roads are quite amazing. You could easily end up like doing circles if you're not careful.
oh, super easy. Just a little story about this. I used to log in an area directly above a house I grew up in. And we're not talking a massive area here. I mean, within reason. We're talking like 60 acres. Yeah, maybe 60, 70 acres, which is big, but it's not massive. We're not talking like the evergreen forest in Ontario. You know what I mean? The boreal forest. We are talking a finite amount of space with relatively easy roads through this, because 60 acres, you can drive around it pretty quick on a four-wheeler. And I got lost up in there for a good day just doing loops because all the roads look the same. You know what I mean? I knew I was never truly lost. I could get to a high point, and this is how it happened. I kept getting to a high point and going, I'm not ending up where I want to be. Because at the high points, I could figure out where I was and where I wanted to get to, but then once you get down in and you have no points of reference, it's real easy to get turned around. The road that you think went straight has actually been slightly curving to the right. You know, there's a lot of things that can happen real easy.
Yeah, no, for sure, and that's a very legit thing. So, yeah. What else? I mean, you, Red Bear, I think, mentioned the chains. I carry traction boards on the top of my vehicle. In my motorcycle, I have the full set ability to change a tire out and a patch kit. My plan is to eventually get tubes for both sets of tires in case I absolutely have to. I could pretty well damage a tire, put tubes in, and still get myself out of there in emergency.
Yep. And this is exactly what I do with the ATV. Funny story, once again, just story time. The big trail that leads from Pictou here in Nova Scotia to Oxford. It's an ATV trail, goes for a long way. It's nice, it's beautiful. Mel and I were taking it. They just re-rocked a bunch of it. Some yahoo got the bright idea to throw a bunch of railroad spikes on it. And we are like 20 kilometers from where we're staying for the night and blow out a back tire. If you have a tube, much like you're saying there, Ben, you can pop it in there and you can limp that thing back. You know what I mean? Because there was no patching this hole. It was like a 1-inch hole. You know what I mean? A tube, like a tire patch, is not filling that in. You can put 20 tire patches in there and it's not filling it in. But a tube, it might get you through.
Yep. No. You're right. You may have to baby it. It may not be the best trip out, but it may get you out of there. So it's a very important thing to consider. So yeah, just having the backup equipment. Other thing, I think both of us do this, extra food. Always take extra food in case you get stuck for a day or two. That is a very good safety net, believe it or not. Always letting people know where you're to. That's a standard rule anytime you go, but especially when you're going with somebody you don't know, because you don't know. They could lead you astray. They could abandon you. Anything could happen. Make sure that people know what's going on. Because I'd hate for you to have a bad trip and not make it out. But I think that's the big stuff. Like, just vet your people well before you go. Don't feel bad about being a little picky. For the trip to work for anyone, it has to be a good fit. So if somebody wants to do a trip that's completely different than yours, then it's not meant to be.
And that's okay, is the other thing. Yeah. That is 100% okay.
Yeah. And I think you're doing a favor to both of you if the trips that you're planning don't match up, to let them go find somebody who wants to do that kind of trip. And I think it's funny. Some people are so desperate to find the right person that they'll pretend that they want the same thing and then just try to lead you into what they really wanted.
The old bait and switch.
Yeah, I really want to do backwoods camping, but could we do it in an all-inclusive hotel? Like, no. These are the two most opposite things in the world, right?
It's funny because that's what my dad says. He says, I love camping as long as it's at a Hojo. If anybody doesn't know, Hojo is a Howard Johnson, and Howard Johnson is a hotel chain.
But yeah, I mean, I've done trips. We did a camping trip one time, and it was camper, going to a park. But even that can show you the difference. We had a long conversation. I explained to them the type of sites I like, what I really want. They're like, "Oh, I fully got you. I got you covered. I'm going to book the sites. Come meet us at this campground in 2 weeks. I'll have everything set up. Just bring the money for the sites." Awesome. Sounds great. I show up. I hate field camping. If I can see all my neighbors at once, I am too close to them and the field is too clear. I like wooded camping. I like to be surrounded. I like to not know their neighbors.
I like a little bit of privacy. 100%.
Okay. And especially, I had a small dog that barked when it could see other people. This was not going to be a good trip for me. And I show up, and they literally have me in the middle of a field. And we're like, I thought we discussed this. And they're like, oh, but this is why we had to do it. We got kids. We need to see the river too. They had all the excuses. But I'm like, it's not what we discussed. I didn't camp with those people very often, if ever again, because A, they lied. They told me they understood what I wanted, and then did the exact opposite so they would be able to do what they wanted to do. Not cool.
And here's the other flip side of that. Being the people that, booster themselves up or tell fibs to get out there. You're not doing anyone any benefit because no one's going to go with you again.
Yeah. And you know what? There are campsites that are in a field for a reason, because there are people who absolutely love those things.
And that's a thing. I'm fine with people that like to do field camping. Growing up as a kid, that's how most of my friends wanted to camp. They wanted to get a big field, everybody set their camps up in a big ring, have a bonfire, stand around, do their thing, go to sleep. And literally, excuse the way this is going to sound, but if you're the guy beside you farts, you're going to hear it in the middle of the night. You know what I mean? Like, they were on top of each other. But that's their idea of camping. And that's cool if you have other people that's what they want to do. That's not my thing. You know what I mean? I was always the guy that kind of went off into the woods by myself while they were all huddled together, and I had a great night's sleep. I enjoyed the privacy of it. Still hung out with them. They got to do their thing. I got to do my thing. It was still a good time. But know what you want out of the camping trip.
100%. I think that's a big
And
part.
Red Bear hit it right on the head. Might as well park in a Walmart parking lot. That's exactly what I felt like. You know what I mean? And on that note, have you ever seen the campers that pull up into the Walmart parking lots and start like congregating in the back corners and making their own little camping park? That's kind of odd too.
I picture that, like the people that park in Walmart campers, or parking lot. I really hope, or I assume, that these are people trying to cover large distances and trying to spend the minimum amount of money. I do not think anyone goes there for like a 2-3 day weekend unless they really just can't travel anymore or they're trying to visit somebody. But it's not what I want. That's not camping per se. To me, you at least have to have trees to camp.
Yeah. And I agree too. But once again, that's the thing. Everybody has differences of what they want out of a camping trip. Just be honest with yourself and the people that you're looking to go camping with. And honestly, at the end of the day, it's going to end up way better for you. I think that's the whole point of this.
Yeah. So, I think that's the highlight is be clear with what you want, be clear with what you expect, and make sure that the people that you're working with respect your wishes and wants and have similar wishes and wants. And if you find a compatible person, I can guarantee you potentially have made a friend for life, and people that you will cherish for years to come. And it's worth holding out for those people because it makes those trips so much better. I have a handful of people now that I can camp that way, and I look forward to every trip like that. It took me a while to build that group of people, and I really hope that each and everyone that's listening, and this is their plan, and if they don't already have this, I hope you can find your people, because when you can find your people and you can do these trips, it is absolutely amazing. Some of them listen to my podcast, so some of them know exactly what I'm talking about. Right? But no, it's definitely something doable. It is a bit of a risk every time you go with somebody you don't know because you don't know what it's going to be like. I think the risk is generally worth it, but always make sure that you're doing it safely and you have a way out in case things aren't working, but also that you're able to actually do what you want to do. I recommend smaller trips for your first few trips. Do not plan, to do the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail as your first trip together. That is going to end up in two ways. One, you will absolutely hate each other and never speak again, or two, you are now basically married together because there's nothing you've done that. There's no in between if you try to do that trip.
I think I covered everything I want to cover here tonight, honestly, on this topic,
too.
Ben. What about you? You got any final thoughts for us? We are coming up on 50 minutes.
I was kind of checking our notes because believe it or not, people, I know it doesn't seem like it. We do take some notes before we do this.
Trust us, folks. If it's this bad with the notes, you don't want to see it without the notes.
But yeah, know when to bail. What are your safety nets? Like, who knows where you're to? How are you going to get out? How are you going to communicate with people? What backup plans do you have? Make sure you have these things set up. And I guess the one last thing, we covered a bit of it. Set your expectations fairly clearly. Drinking is a really good example, and it's not the only one. Before I go with everyone, I always kind of ask that question: is this a trip where alcohol is okay? Because honestly, some people are not okay with alcohol.
And that's their right, 100%.
And the other question to really know is how much alcohol. Because if I'm going in for a 2 or 3 night trip and a guy or girl is carrying in a couple of 26ers, then that's a totally different trip than somebody who's taking 1 or 2 sips.
Did you say a couple of 26ers?
Listen.
Did they bring any camping gear? But I get
Yours
it. I know
between us.
people that would be them in 100%. That is their idea of camping.
I have done those trips. I had a couple of nights. It was a good opportunity. We weren't traveling too much, and we had the room to take it. We had drinks. It was the plan. Even our lake trip, there was plans for some alcohol on those trips, and so maybe we had a few too many. But make sure that's aware of before you start, because if somebody isn't comfortable with people who are drinking, that could make a trip absolutely miserable for them. And a lot of trips, all I want to see is one or two at night, and that's it. And other trips, I don't even bother. It's not worth the wait, and honestly, it's not something I need. I am really good either way, but it only works for me if everyone is on the same level.
Yep, I
Same
agree.
thing with taking your pet. If you're taking a pet, make sure everyone is aware of that and that they're okay with that.
Excuse me.
The last time I took Molly, there was a fight over who got to sleep with her. That was how that one went. But I mean, it works the other. I've seen people that absolutely despise having a dog. Oh, that stupid thing doesn't stop barking, or it's always underfoot, or whatever. Yeah, well, you don't like dogs, and every time the dog's going to go around, he's annoy you. It's not going to be a good trip, right? Other people loved having a dog there. You know, they feel safer with the dog. They feel more comfortable. Yeah.
And yeah, that's just it. Once again, folks, find like-minded people. There's going to be people that like dogs. There's going to be people that don't like dogs. There's going to be people that do some things that you are going to think are really out there in left field. And it may be perfectly normal for them, and there's a niche for it. That's the thing. It's okay to say no. It's okay to dive deep. It's okay to find the people that you want to go with to enjoy your time in the woods. And that's where it all comes down to. Go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing to keep in mind, kids and wives. You laugh, but it's really true.
No, that's why I'm laughing. I can think of several instances where, and this is why we're laughing, folks, and I know exactly where you're going to go with this one, Ben. You go out on a camping trip and you think it's just going to be you and this other person and a couple other guys. You get in the mindset of this. And I mean, this could be a couple of girls going out. It could be a couple of guys going out. It could be a couple of people that are just all the same age going out. They get this idea of what it's going to be in their head. And then all of a sudden you blow in and one of the people brought their significant other and their kids. And you're like, okay, but that changes things a little bit. Not that it's bad. Once again, not that it's bad. It just changes that overall idea you had in your head. Now, instead of it being this trip that you had already kind of set up and scripted in your head, you kind of got to flip that on a dime and figure it all out as you go. It can throw a wrench in the works. I'm not telling you don't take your kids, folks. I'm just saying be upfront if you're going to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think my wife is very much aware that is a thing. And so when I'm doing a trip, my wife loves joining me. Like, don't get me wrong, she often joins me on trips. And I have no problem taking my wife. And I have no problem if the people I'm camping take their wife. But let us know beforehand, because it's a different trip. It's a different trip when you have different people. Each individual on a trip changes the atmosphere. If you're going with a bunch of sticky old guys who think they're going to make, they're going to joke and they're going to be just guys for the weekend, and then all of a sudden you show up with a 12-year-old girl.
It changes things, you know what I mean?
Right.
There's this thing, and prime example, and people are going to laugh, but this is a real thing. If you're going out with a bunch of guys, there's a good chance for me, I may just sleep in my underwear, you know what I mean? Or a pair of long johns or something that's, because it's warm out. All of a sudden you bring your 12-year-old girl, well, that plan just went out the window. It's a minor inconvenience, absolutely. But what if I didn't bring pajamas? You know what I mean? Just be upfront. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and along those same lines, swimming.
Yeah.
It's funny because I have Facebook open on one of these pages, and Kevin Callan just posted something here. And anyone who doesn't know who Kevin Callan is, Kevin Callan has a series of books out. The Happy Camper, I think they are.
Yep, that sounds right.
Kevin talks about Algonquin Park, and I'm pretty sure one of the stories is when he goes camping, he'll just go in the buff. And there was a trip he went where his buddy came with a Speedo. And I think through the jigs and reels, something ended up happening, and is one of them ended up with a Charlie horse, and they couldn't get back to shore, and they had to get rescued. And the whole thing sounds absolutely embarrassing and scary. And anyone who wants to read his books, go read his books. It's absolutely hilarious. But yeah, make sure that you know before you do the trip. I did a trip a little while ago where there was a possibility that we would hit uh, hot springs, which I still haven't done yet. It's on my goal list. And I, of course, packed the swimsuit. But when I'm out there and I'm chatting with the guy, I said, what are the rules on these hot springs?" He said it varies from one to the next, but he said some are very much clothing optional, and he told me he rarely worried about it. Like, he didn't take a suit; he just went. Like, that would be good to know before we went, because maybe I'm not comfortable with that, or maybe I am, and I wouldn't have bothered with the extra. It doesn't really matter where your personal comfort is. Make sure that everyone knows what you're planning and doing and what you're expecting, because it's a very abrupt thing to find that out later that you expect to, Like you said, you sleep in your underwear. That's cool, right? Like, it's what you do in your tent, your hammock, your sleep bag. I really could care less. I'm not worried about that. But, how you're going to hang around camp, I'm a little bit more concerned with that.
What you're saying? You know what? I can't even say that with a straight face. I'm not hanging around any fire in my underwear. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's the thing. Just make sure that everyone knows what to expect. What's okay in one situation with one group of people is not going to be okay in another situation with a different group of people, and that's okay.
Red Bear's saying some stuff here. Let's see. When we go to I think we downed two 26ers on our last trip. I hear there are several nude beaches in Alberta. Just be warned. Actually, there's a nude beach here in Nova Scotia too. I've never been on it, but I know where it's at. Always been interested. Just haven't actually made the journey yet. Haven't gotten that adventurous to this date. But yeah, it's just like Ben said. It's another thing. It doesn't. Don't assume everybody's as comfortable as you are. And I'm guilty of that to a certain degree, but I've gotten better with it over experience. But yeah, not everybody's going to be as comfortable as you are, or other people are going to be more comfortable than you are. And both things are okay. Just make sure you're on the same wavelength when you go out.
Yeah, I think it's important. I really do. I think everyone knowing what to expect makes the trip a lot better. Because, the way somebody acts and behaves in town is not necessarily how they act and behave in the woods, and that's fine. It's a different environment. It's maybe a more freeing environment, and by that I mean you can say and do things. You don't have to worry about who's watching you, and you're expecting to be with people you're fairly comfortable with. So that's where you can be yourself the most. And honestly, I find that's where you really learn the most about people. And I have never had bad experiences with this stuff. But I think it's because we've had pretty good open communication before I go camping with my friends.
Watch out for upside down pineapples. Does that mean something to you?
It probably means a lot to a lot of people who. I'm not a member of that group, but yes, that's a.
Oh, I know what it is. Okay, yes. Okay. And the only reason I know this is because it was on the radio a month ago, the morning show, the Q Morning or whatever the hell it is here. That came up. And honestly, if I hadn't heard that just in passing, I would still be like, upside down pineapple. What in the heck are you guys talking about? But I know now. I don't want to know, but I know.
Well, great people, friendly.
Yeah, very friendly. But
nothing wrong with it.
Nope. Like I said, just make sure everyone's on the same wavelength. Doesn't matter what your thing is. There's a group out there that's going to support it and be very happy about it. Just make sure you're upfront about it and it is like-minded people.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. Everyone wants to leave comfortable. If there's something that truly makes you uncomfortable, make sure you share that with people before you go. And it could be drinking. It could be smoking. Drugs. A lot of people are not comfortable near drugs. And if you are somebody who regularly uses drugs, and that makes them nervous to be alone in the woods with you because they just don't know if you're going to hurt yourself or what could happen. Be aware of that, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And that goes for any kind of drugs, alcohol or otherwise. Some people just don't want to be around it because they're recovering. You know what I mean? People have their reasons. It doesn't make it any less valid than your own reasons. Once again, just find like minded people or be
Yeah.
respectful of the people you go. For instance, if you are a recreational marijuana user and the people you're going with are just dead against it, but you still really want to go, maybe you just don't do it for that trip. You know what I mean? That's still legitimate too, as long as you know going into it.
Yep. You know, food. If somebody's really uncomfortable with certain types of food, maybe you shouldn't take those. You mentioned, you know, setting your parameters. Say you're a vegan and you really don't. Make sure everyone knows that before you go. Maybe you look for other vegans to camp with, so it's easier to share food and stuff. You know, or any other um, thing. The other thing I guess we didn't talk about, and then we can wrap it up. Any medical concerns that you should be aware of. So, if you have a poor heart, if you have allergies, or if there's medication you need to have, maybe you're diabetic, because you and that other person or that other small group you're with are a pretty close group, it's really good if you can share that pertinent information and they may be able to help you should something go wrong, right? You have an injury that may act up and make travel difficult. Make sure they're aware and say, I don't expect it to be a problem if it's not probably going to be a problem, but you know, right now, one of my wrists is not quite as strong as the other. So I know that for certain things, I just have to babysit that, right?
But once again, all things to know going in. Set the expectations, set the boundaries, and you'll still have a great time.
Yeah. Anyways, I think we've really rambled on about this one, and I hope everyone who stuck around and listened to it enjoyed it. There's definitely something there for absolutely everyone. I hope everyone finds some good camping buddies and gets out there and has some fun, and hopefully we hear about it. Let us know. What are your limits? What are you interested in? What if you're going to post on a public forum, keep it safe for work. But yeah, what are you looking for? What are you not looking for? Anything else? Email directly to Robert, and he will share anything that he thinks I should see.
Absolutely. You can contact us all with the methods down below there. We'd love to hear from you folks. So until next week, get out there, have fun, play safe. Night all.
At all.